Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar with the org. We're really excited to have all of you on this call today as we dig into some top tips to transform your database for 2024. We hope that you leave today with some ways that you can think about how to clean up your database and how to think more strategically about how to leverage your nonprofit CRM, both in advance of the busy end of year giving season, and then also to help you prioritize your fundraising strategies for next year. Very excited for you all to be here and very excited to welcome the Orr Group to this presentation with us today. With that, we will be recording this session, so you will have access to that later on this week, as well as the PowerPoint, as well as some additional resources that might be helpful for you as you're thinking through these topics that we discussed today. If you do have any questions, feel free to put those into the questions panel and send in any chats that you might have related to issues with the platform itself. We'll be happy to address those if anything comes up throughout the course of our presentation today. So with that, we'll go ahead and discuss our agenda. First up, we'll do a brief introduction to who our speakers are. Then we'll go a little bit more about who StratusLIVE is, talk more about the Orr Group. Then we'll dig into the meat of our presentation today. First, discussing data health, what that is, what that means, why that's important to your organization. Then we'll talk more about database cleanup tips and a process that we at StratusLIVE recommend that our clients walk through. We'll talk a little bit more about reports and dashboards, some of those that might be helpful for you as you're beginning to identify your fundraising strategies for the end of the year. We'll talk more about pipeline preparation for 2024, a little bit about staff training, how to make sure that they're most effectively utilizing your CRM or database, and then we'll conclude with some database analysis, and then finally a brief question and answer session. So now our speakers for today. First, myself. My name is Kelly Perry. I'm a senior digital marketing manager with StratusLIVE. I've been with the company 4 years now. Very excited to be speaking on this topic today, and especially working with the Orr Group to provide some helpful insights for you all as you're unpacking how to best leverage your database. Abby?
Hello, thank you so much for letting me join today's webinar. My name is Abby Carlson and I am a director at Orr Group, and I head our data analytics and management service line. So working with partners such as StratusLIVE to ensure that organizations are fully optimizing their systems to push forward fundraising. So I'm excited to be here today.
So a little bit more about StratusLIVE. Our mission is to drive change with increased impact, and we do that through offering a nonprofit industry cloud solution. This is a complete, fully integrated enterprise class solution for modern digital fundraising, and we're really proud of the industry recognition that this solution has received and also the overall impact that our clients have had through utilizing our tools. Currently, we have over 20 million active donor profiles leveraging our platform, and all of these donors have realized over $1 billion in annualized giving. So very proud of the impact that these organizations and that the donors that they work with have had in the communities in which they serve. Abby?
Great. And to give you some more information about Orr Group is a fundraising consulting firm. We have a national presence, and basically we do everything fundraising and development with our nonprofit organization partners. So we are a fully embedded partnership firm. We offer services in the categories of strategy, campaign, fundraising, planned giving, leadership, and talent. I specifically work with our organizations on data analytics and management, which is the next slide here, where I help our partners utilize efficient systems to analyze and manage their data in order to solve problems, look for opportunities, and ultimately drive strong cultures of philanthropy. So extremely excited to talk more about how to prepare your database and utilize your data to close out a strong 2023 and prepare for 2024.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. Well, we wanted to kick off this conversation just with kind of level setting here and thinking about the purpose of a nonprofit CRM or a nonprofit database. And I think for some organizations, this is a tool that they purchase and they're not thinking of it as being a dynamic system. It really is a living, breathing entity that needs some human interaction and needs some intervention to make sure that you're getting the most out of this system. You spent a lot of time and resources and energy in choosing a nonprofit CRM, so you want to make sure that you get the best use out of it. So we like to think of this in two separate analogies. First, we can think of this, your CRM and your database, like a garden. You need to tend to this garden. You need to nurture it. If you're nourishing and you're fertilizing the soil of your garden, you're going to generate produce from that. You could think of that soil perhaps as data that's within your nonprofit CRM. If you're augmenting that data, if you're adding to it, if you're combing through the data and cleaning out the data, you're going to generate some valuable insights from that system. The produce within your garden is also growing in various stages, and that reflects how dynamic your system is. It's constantly changing. You might have seasons of high activity. Perhaps right now, as you're gearing up for the busy end of year giving season, you might be leveraging the system a lot and creating campaigns, segmenting your donors, thinking strategically about the reports that you need to run before the year end. All of that leads to high activity. You might have seasons of low activity. Perhaps during the summertime, the fundraising campaigns might be slower. You might not be running as many events, so the system might not get as much usage. So that kind of reflects perhaps the changing seasons in a garden that endures. Another analogy that might be helpful for you all is to realize that there are parts of your database that you're constantly interacting with and working with, like the top of an iceberg. You can see your donor records. You can see the financial transactions. You're in those aspects of your systems, perhaps day in and day out. But below that waterline, there might be integrations, automations, business processes that are running behind the scenes and automatically that's influencing that top layer data that you're not really thinking about all of the time. So it's really critical and important to understand what's lurking underneath the water. What are your integrations? How are those impacting your day-to-day operations? And have some detailed documentation and understanding of how those systems are interacting with your overall nonprofit CRM. So hopefully that helps set the stage on why this discussion is so important and how to leverage your database to the best that you can. Abby, do you want to talk a little bit more about data health?
Absolutely. So what Kelly said, your database is not static whatsoever. Your users and your integrations are constantly adding new records, manipulating current records, so lots going on throughout the year. You want to ensure that your data health is as healthy as it can be. And what we mean by data health, it really represents how well your organization's data supports its goals and objectives. So a lot of your goals and objectives are going to be revenue goals, program goals maybe, but your data is only going to be healthy if your data is able to push forward that strategy and so you can reach your goals. We like to think of it as one, easily discoverable. Are you able to find the data that you need? So hopefully it's living in your database. Two, are you able to understand it? Is it clear in its depiction? Do you understand what the data is trying to tell you? And three, is it valuable for the work that you're doing? If it's not those three things, then your data is unfortunately not healthy for you to reach those goals. And we want to ensure that this data health is maintained throughout the life cycle of your database. Some common examples of unhealthy data that are very frequent throughout the year is actually located on this next slide. They include things such as typos, duplicate records, non-standardized formatting. So are users utilizing fields for different reasons? Are they inputting certain status or drop-down menus differently than other users? Is some of your data missing from the database? Are they located in other platforms or in Excel spreadsheets, for example? And then finally, is your data outdated or inaccurate? People move, people change jobs. We want to ensure that we capture those important milestones and that important data as it's changing constantly.
Thanks, Abby. That leads perfectly to talk about the next slide here and next portion of the presentation, just about how to clean up your database and how to more or less deal with that messy data. And this seems to be a task that many of us push off. We don't want to deal with. It's not maybe especially rewarding or glamorous. It can be time intensive. So for us, we think it's very important that you're setting up a process and a schedule time within your calendar to complete something like this. We think of it as like that closet in your house that you're just shoving in coats and board games, and it's just becoming so unmanageable. You need to almost set a time, a couple of hours on a free Saturday, and just take care of it. This can be similar standpoint to that. So if you're setting up this time, you're breaking up the process into smaller chunks. It makes it a little bit more manageable. So maybe you want to start with a list of your major donors or key volunteers. You dig into those records first. Other areas to look at within your systems are removing any lists or views or workflows that you might not be leveraging anymore. You want to look specifically at the triggers of some of those workflows to make sure you're not impacting anything else in the database. You also want to cross-check those email addresses that you have in your system and phone numbers with your marketing solution. You might even be paying based upon number of email addresses within your solution. So by cleaning those up, that helps save some costs. Remove all those email addresses that have bounced. Take out the phone numbers that aren't in service anymore. And then perform address verification services to make sure that your constituents' addresses are up to date. Purge all of those old addresses. So beyond that key constituent data, think also about looking at your engagement data, like interest data or participations. Are you still actively tracking these types of records? Are there different types of measurements right now that might be more meaningful for you? Say maybe over the past couple of years, you've started offering virtual events. Maybe you need to add that as an engagement type within your system and make sure you're tracking that on your constituent records. And if you are removing some of this engagement data, make sure that you won't lose any historical significance by getting rid of that. You may want to download that. You may want to save that somewhere for future reference. Next step, look at the users in your system. Do they still need these same levels of permissions? Do they need to be assigned a new role? Has anyone left your organization that you just need to remove and they just haven't been removed yet? That may also help you save some costs. And then take a look at your integrations. Are they up to date? Are the data points mapping to the right fields? Are you still using them? Are you using them to their fullest potential through workflows or automations? And realizing that your system can help you through this process can be very beneficial. So you might be able to use some duplicate detection services within your CRM to help you identify, merge, and deactivate some of these duplicate records that are more or less mucking up your platform. So at StratusLIVE, we recommend to our clients that they do this in a tiered structure so that your database administrators aren't overwhelmed. Look at those constituents that you have in portfolios. Then at those constituents with donations that aren't in portfolios, you may want to break that out into smaller groups based upon donation size. And then finally look at those constituents that don't have donations but have engagement data. Maybe they've attended an event, maybe they were a volunteer. Finally, just use bulk record deletion and get rid of those inactive constituent records from the system. Finally, it's really important to think about how much of a benefit you can have by just using one database when your entire team is looking at the record in one way. If an event planner and a major gift officer and someone in finance is looking at constituent record the same, it makes it a lot easier for the team so that they're not having to look to multiple databases to find the information that they're looking for. And just a couple last points here. Remember that we're all human, and when you're optimizing your platforms, you need to make sure that you're optimizing them for the human. Don't necessarily expect perfection from the users in your database. Make sure you're building with errors in mind and maybe have some guardrails or allow the system itself to help you out with that. And finally, maybe an error could potentially be an opportunity for connection. We hosted an event a couple of years ago, and a woman mentioned that one of her key donors was listed in the system, her salutation was still listed as Mrs. And unfortunately, her husband had passed, and she had received some communication from the organization that listed her title still as Mrs., which kind of led herself to feel a little bit of sadness. And she was upset that the organization didn't really realize that her husband has passed. So the fundraiser went to her house, in fact, and spoke with her. And this system mess up, so to speak, where the database was incorrect, led to a good connection that this fundraiser made with the donor. They had a very good conversation and they connected over this. And then she ended up making a donation to that organization based on this conversation. So think about these mishaps sometimes as perhaps opportunities, although we should strive more or less for perfection. With that, we can talk a little bit more about some of these keys to having an effective database. And as we mentioned, one system of record does make it a lot easier for you all to achieve your goals. And you can think about this in terms of some other benefits. First, ease of use. Does your CRM allow you to easily collaborate with your team? Does it have a familiar interface so that your team feels very confident using it? We know that there's very high turnover at nonprofits, and it's important to consider the ease of use of your system so that if a new team member comes in, they can jump right in, they feel confident and comfortable using the platform. Also, leveraging consistent or automated processes. Speaking of turnover, this can lead to a lack of consistency. And if you don't have your processes documented, that becomes a huge headache for you. Consider if your system has some automations, some workflows, so that these repeatable processes can be done behind the scenes, and then you're creating better consistencies for your donors, and overall that'll lead to some incredible results. Another aspect is thinking about integrations and processing flexibility. You really should be striving to make sure every single donor touchpoint is being brought into your CRM. That should be your goal so that you have a holistic look at your donor and you can best steward them and engage with them from one system. Also offering consumer-like targeted segmentation. We know right now that our donors are expecting to engage with us the same way that they're engaging with commercial brands. So you have to offer these modern consumer experiences. And that could be accomplished through using data, through using analytics, as long as that's aggregated to that prospect and donor. That way you can better target them, you can better segment them, and they have an overall better experience with your organization. And finally, is your system undergoing ongoing enhancements? Right now, everyone's talking about AI. Even if you're not adopting AI technologies, it is critical that the systems that you're purchasing and using are at least considering adding AI, generative or predictive AI, so that you can ensure that they're up to date, that you won't be left behind and leveraging these technologies. Some of those enhancements might be related to configurable personalized giving, based on donor profiles, trends and analysis through summaries, personalization, real-time data services that provide personalized experiences, and then predictive analytics. Can it help you identify potential donors based on their interests, their capacity to give, their likelihood to give? Can it help you anticipate future giving trends, needs, and challenges based upon historical data and overall pattern recognition? So with that, Abby, do we want to talk more about how to identify our progress through reports and dashboards?
Absolutely. I think once you get your data in a good spot and you know that your data is healthy and you've gone through all of the checks and cleanup needed, it's important to take a look at multiple different reports and dashboards to give you that comprehensive view of your progress. So I won't go through each and every one of these listed here, but these are just some examples of different indicators to show your progress to date. First, looking at what have you raised to date against different goals, looking at your restricted versus unrestricted funding, who has brought in the funds, as well as looking at retention and acquisition, attrition, and recapture rates of your donors. How does it compare from the year before? How does it compare from multiple years before? It's helpful to have a benchmark comparison with your reports and dashboards. From there, I wouldn't just stop at looking at what you've raised to date. It's important to give yourself a 360 view of your progress. So with that, it's important to look at your pipeline progress. How many new donor prospects did you add into the system throughout the year? How many solicitations did you make? Proposals, asks, how many people did you meet with? How many calls did you make? How many letters did you send? Mailing appeals, etc. It's important to give yourself that viewpoint so you can see what was successful and what was not successful. And then finally, once you've looked at all of those different indicators, you can start to pinpoint what you want to bring into the next year and really hone in on. That will help you start to finalize your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and it will give you a better idea of where you need to improve and in which area. So with that being said, once you've reviewed your progress from the end of 2023, you can start to set up and prepare for 2024. Utilizing your different data and KPIs, you can start to set up your reports and dashboards for the new year, which is on the next slide. All right, so now that you have your new factors, you can start to track it in the new year. I would recommend setting up multiple reports, but also multiple dashboards. You can have a full organization dashboard, but it's also important to create smaller, more narrow dashboards that look at certain team performance or individual frontline fundraiser performance. It helps identify where certain areas were successful or maybe lagged if you narrow it in a bit more. I also think it's important to set up reoccurring reports that you can look at multiple times throughout the year, whether daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly. Reports and dashboards are only helpful if we review them and utilize them throughout the year. They don't need to be used at the beginning or the end of the year. Talk with your teams, such as your fundraisers, on what is helpful to monitor throughout the year. What indicators do they need to review to ensure that they remain on target? It's also helpful to get with other departments, such as your marketing department or your finance department, to see what reports they can utilize as well. I always like to set up reports for reconciliation with the finance team to ensure that reconciliation runs smoothly, whether that's weekly or monthly. And then finally, ensure that your important KPIs and metrics are displayed that you discovered from the year before. Again, everyone's KPIs and metrics are going to be different. You don't need to always measure the same things year after year. It really just depends on what has worked for you in the past and what you want to examine going forward. Especially if you realize, for example, engaging with donors via events is as a successful metric for your organization. You're going to want to include a few charts and graphs and reports diving into your event data. If meeting with your donors one-on-one is super helpful, then you're going to want to look into how many meetings per month are you having with major gift donors, how many calls are you making, how many major gift donors are in each fundraiser's pipeline, and if they're engaging with them properly. So those are just some of the ways to ensure that you're setting up your reports and dashboards for the new year. But in addition to that, it's important to ensure that your pipeline is ready for that next year. Pipelines are extremely helpful to be strategic and ensure that we're meeting revenue goals, but it's important that we start off strong in the new year by preparing the next iteration of the pipeline. So ensuring that any lapsed donors from prior years are added to the pipeline. We want to make sure that nothing is left off the table and that we are adequately following up with our generous donors. Second, it's important to refresh any outdated cultivation and solicitation plans. Many times plans change throughout the year based on different factors, so we want to ensure that we do a quick refresh of that and we include a fresh new approach in the new year. Third, I would also get with your marketing team to evaluate the communications calendar. It's really helpful to include that within your pipeline when you think about next steps and cultivation plans. If there's an e-blast going out, if there's an event coming up, how can you utilize that to refresh your pipeline and be more strategic with your donors? Fourth, I would say you can identify opportunities to re-engage donors and prospects in the new year. I find that is a great opportunity right there. So if you are stuck on figuring out that next step with a certain prospect or donor, I always suggest utilizing the new year as a way to engage with them, meet with them, call them up, tell them about all of your exciting opportunities in 2024. And then lastly, always review your pipeline utilizing reports, utilizing dashboards to see if there are any gaps. Are you close to any goals, or are you lacking in certain areas and you need to add more prospects to it, need to add more research, need a better strategy to approach a certain prospect? So right now is a pretty good year to look at what you need to research, what you need to refresh, and see how you can fill in the pipeline so you're off to a great start in the new year. So that is a little bit about pipeline preparation. I'll turn over to Kelly for staff training.
Thanks. Given the fact that you could have the most accurate, the most well-organized, most optimized database, if your staff isn't properly trained on how to leverage it, it doesn't really matter all that much. But so here are some tips that both StratusLIVE and Orr Group have compiled to help you conduct staff training and what you need to think about. First, identifying those users that need that additional training and support. And think about perhaps setting up some organization-wide training sessions that they can take a part of. Highlight any webinars. Maybe there's previous webinar recordings that might be helpful. Make sure you disseminate that to anyone who's leveraging your platform. Get involved in user groups. If your providers offer those, that's a great way to have your voice heard with regards to feature requests that you might have, or any particular areas of the platform that you might be struggling with or need some additional support on. That's a great way to lean on other users of that platform to make sure that you're understanding the system as best as you can. And also nominating users to be champions. I think within organizations that they have very slim IT teams or slim IT resources, this is a really important aspect to consider, is that you need to nominate someone to really own the database and to be in charge of overseeing it. And then finally, thinking about in creating and refreshing these standard operating procedures or style guides, naming conventions. If you go through this process of identifying this messy data and cleaning up the messy data, you need to create a process so that can be done again at a later date. All of those instructions too should be sent to your staff, sent to new team members in their onboarding package. And that will ensure that they can be set up for success as soon as they hit the ground running in their new role. So with that, Abby, we can go ahead and just close us out with talking more about the database analysis.
Great. At Orr Group, we always recommend that organizations utilize time to produce a database analysis. So what does that mean? It's really just taking a full look at your database, what's going well, what's not going well, checking your data health, looking at your SOPs, and just ultimately how is your organization optimizing the database and is it working? We do this alongside our nonprofit partners all the time. It is extremely helpful, and it's something that we recommend the entire organization invests in if they're going to be utilizing a database like StratusLIVE. So working with your leadership as well as the StratusLIVE team to ensure that you're utilizing capabilities that are helpful. So first, you're asking yourself, how is your organization utilizing your data? Is the data that you're collecting helpful for you? Is it able to help you make informed decisions and push fundraising strategy? If it's not, that's something that you'll definitely want to discuss with your team to ensure that you're collecting the data needed. Second, are there areas of functionality that your team is not prioritizing but are of interest to you? I definitely recommend getting with the StratusLIVE team to go through those, have demos, and ensure that you are getting worth out of your database. Third, what are your data goals for the new year? Again, once you're identifying those key indicators of success, what else can you do to collect helpful data and ensure that you're making those informed decisions? What goals do you have for the next year as it pertains to your data? Fourth, can you enhance your data with other integrations? Integrations are very helpful in order to collect more data as well as integrate tools that can help engage your donors. So are there any integrations that you can set up? what's working, what's not working. Again, if something is not working, it's great to get with staff to come up with a plan to make sure that it is working, connect with StratusLIVE to discuss it. We want to ensure that the database is pushing forward strategy and it's not hindering anything. And then finally, everyone is extremely busy these days. I'm sure the database is probably the last thing on your mind when you've had such a long and busy day, but we want to make sure that we're utilizing it throughout the day. So thinking about what processes or work streams that you can offload and streamline. Automations are a great way to do this. So that way the database is working in your favor and it's not adding on too much extra work that, let's be honest, not everyone has time for. Utilizing a database analysis, I always think is a great way to just level set, come up with a great plan for the next year, and really push forward the database rather than having it just run in the background.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for that, Abby. And those are some great ways for us to round out the year and making sure that we're getting the best use of our systems in 2024. As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, you put a lot of time in researching these systems, and you want to make sure that they are leveraged to the best of their ability and that everyone is meeting their goals through these tools. So it's really critical to follow those steps at the end of the year and start off 2024 on the right foot. I encourage anyone who has any questions, feel free to chime those in. One that I had for you, Abby, that I think you and I have talked about and gone back and forth about is that an organization is going to have very unique goals, very unique objectives, and that really is going to influence some of the reports that they're creating right now before the end of the year. So how do you and the Orr Group really address that with clients when you're going through that end of year planning phase?
Yeah, I think it really goes through that database analysis and also just a data analysis in general, really indicating what is working and what is not working as it pertains to your donors. What outreaches or touch points are successful and where do you see more engagement with the people you're reaching out to? Once you've identified that through your own data, looking at your marketing efforts as well as your events and certain fundraising campaigns, you'll be able to start to identify what's successful and what's not successful. And once you've done that, you can really start to structure your dashboards and your reports to really hone in on those key factors. So I always suggest that a comprehensive analysis of your data in your fundraising activity is imperative to ensure that you understand how your constituents like to engage with your organization.
Awesome. Got to put in a lot of homework to make sure that you're getting the best use out of those dashboards. With that, unless anyone has any other questions, really want to thank Abby for joining us today and having the Orr Group present. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we will be sharing the webinar recording with you and the deck. If you want to get in touch with us at StratusLIVE, our email address is on the screen as well as Abby's. And again, want to thank you all for spending this about 40 minutes or so with us on a Wednesday, and we hope to be in touch with you all very soon.
Thank you.
Bye now.